People always thought Johnny Carson was the man who taught America how to laugh. But if you think this story is only about fame and glittering lights, stay with me till the end, because what hides in the shadows will shock you even more. On television, Carson was charming, sharp, and the king of late night. But behind that curtain, his life was scarred by betrayal, addictions, and tragedies no one dared to speak of. The first and most painful wound was his failure as a father. Carson had 3 sons with his first wife, and one of them, Richard, better known as Rick, struggled with mental illness from a young age. In an era when mental health was seen as shameful, Carson chose silence. He distanced himself, even when Rick was hospitalized. His daughter once admitted bitterly, "My father was never there when we needed him." And the tragedy reached its darkest point in 1991 when Rick's car plunged off a 125-foot cliff in California. Carson gave a tribute on television with a trembling voice, but the truth is, he never embraced his son or told him he loved him. That guilt haunted him forever. But guilt wasn't his only demon. Carson was also at war with alcohol. When sober, he was witty and charming. But once the bottle took hold, he became violent, unrecognizable. At his show's 25th anniversary party, he publicly screamed at his son in front of cameras, almost striking him before being held back. Earlier, he had even been arrested for drunk driving in his DeLorean, sentenced to probation, and forced into rehab. On stage, he laughed about drinking, but everyone knew those jokes came from a man spiraling down. And yet, these were only the beginnings of secrets darker than anyone imagined. Carson's marriages were not love stories, they were battlefields. His second marriage to Joanne Copeland began with glamour, but quickly descended into betrayal. Johnny was hunting for women across Hollywood, while Joanne fell into the arms of football star Frank Gifford. What turned this scandal into madness was Johnny's obsession. Instead of letting go, he ordered his lawyer to break into the apartment where he suspected Joanne was meeting Frank. When the lawyer returned with her lingerie, Carson snapped. He smashed furniture, drowned himself in alcohol, and cried like a broken child. The marriage dragged on until 1972, but Joanne later said coldly, "I would never go back to him." But Johnny's infidelity didn't stop with his wife. He betrayed his mistresses too. Playboy model Angel Tompkins thought she was special, only to discover he was seeing other women behind her back. To cover his betrayal, Carson showered her with gifts, Rolls-Royce, diamonds, luxury suites. Yet the emptiness remained. For Johnny, women were conquests, not partners. At the center of all this chaos stood one figure, his mother, Ruth Carson. Johnny called her the Wicked Witch. She never praised him, only mocked and belittled him, even after he became a national star. In drunken moments, he admitted, "She destroyed all my marriages." Her venom haunted him, twisting his relationships until love became impossible. Even after her death, Johnny said bluntly, "She never loved me, and I have no reason to love her either." And if his personal life was poisoned at home, his career was equally fueled by hatred outside. Carson's feuds became legendary. His cruelest target was Wayne Newton, the Las Vegas star. On national television, Carson mocked his masculinity and sexuality, turning Newton into a laughingstock. Until one day, Newton stormed into NBC and warned, "Do it again, and I'll beat you here." That was the only time Carson fell silent. Carson's jealous streak didn't stop with Wayne Newton. His next target was Tom Snyder, host of The Tomorrow Show. Snyder's growing popularity drove Johnny mad. At a Los Angeles restaurant, with wine clouding his judgment, Carson stood up in front of everyone and mocked Snyder as a mad dog, pounding the table so hard that guests thought he had lost his mind. What others saw as insecurity, Carson saw as war. But jealousy wasn't his only weapon. He also loved using cruelty as comedy. One of his favorite targets was Raymond Burr, star of Perry Mason. On live television, instead of celebrating Burr's career, Carson mocked his weight mercilessly. He compared him to a freighter, joked the guest chair might break, and reduced Burr to a punchline. Humiliated, Burr vowed never to return. For Carson, that was entertainment. For others, it was bullying before millions. And yet, the most toxic feud of all was with Bob Hope. Hope liked to arrive with scripted jokes, rehearsed and rigid. Carson despised that. He grumbled, "He's not real. Everything is pre-written." When Hope grew older and struggled on stage, Carson showed no sympathy. He sneered behind the scenes. "If I end up like that guy, just shoot me." The king of late night could be merciless even toward legends. But betrayal cut him the deepest when it came from his own friends. Joan Rivers was once introduced by Carson as the funniest woman in America. She owed her career to him. But when she launched her own show in the same time slot, Carson saw it as treason. He never spoke to her again, banned her from The Tonight Show, and ignored her desperate phone calls. Even when tragedy struck her life, Carson remained cold. For him, loyalty was sacred and betrayal unforgivable. The betrayal with Joan Rivers carried another hidden layer, an affair that both tried to keep buried. Joan later admitted she had seen a tape of Johnny with women who weren't his wives, calling it insane. Behind the curtain of comedy, Carson's private life was entangled with danger and scandal. But the darkest twist came when a simple joke of his turned into a real national crisis. In December 1973, during a Tonight Show monologue, Carson casually joked about a toilet paper shortage in America. The audience laughed, but the next morning, chaos erupted. People rushed to supermarkets, shelves were stripped bare, and pushing matches broke out over the last rolls. Within hours, toilet paper became more precious than gold. The panic lasted for 20 weeks, with rationing signs and black market hoarding. Johnny had to apologize on air, but the damage was done. One careless line had sparked one of the strangest consumer panics in U.S. history. And yet, his career continued to soar. Carson wasn't just a talk show host. He was the architect of an entire format. His sharp monologues, unpredictable improvisations, and magnetic charm created television magic. Guests felt both nervous and blessed to be on a stage. A single nod from Carson could launch a comedian's career overnight. Jerry Seinfeld, Drew Carey, and Jay Leno all traced their first breaks back to him. Even U.S. presidents couldn't escape his reach. Nixon, Reagan, Clinton, Carson turned them all into punchlines. A single joke from him could do more damage than a newspaper editorial. That was the scale of his power. He won Emmys, a Peabody, and even the Presidential Medal of Freedom. But behind every award, behind the roar of laughter, his demons never left him. The mask of humor always hid a soul cracking in silence. By the 1990s, Johnny Carson's reign was still unmatched, but the cracks in his personal world grew wider. He had everything: fame, fortune, respect, but peace was never part of the package. His nights were haunted by insomnia, his days by failed marriages, and a loneliness money couldn't cure. Off camera, he was withdrawn, a man who trusted almost no one. Friends described him as brilliant but cold, generous but distant. He would give strangers thousands in tips at a bar, then cut lifelong companions out of his life with no explanation. When Jay Leno and David Letterman began circling for his throne, Carson played the role of the kingmaker silently. The late-night wars that followed were brutal, but Carson remained a ghostly figure, rarely speaking out. Audiences never knew the bitterness, the rivalries, or the betrayals that brewed behind the curtains. They only saw the confident host, delivering flawless monologues and iconic interviews. But his legacy wasn't just television, it was cultural dominance. For 3 decades, America didn't just watch The Tonight Show, they lived by it. Families gathered, comedians prayed for his approval, and celebrities feared his sharp tongue. When Carson finally retired in 1992, an era ended. The stage was left silent, and millions felt the void instantly. In his final years, Carson kept almost entirely out of the spotlight. Rarely photographed, seldom interviewed, he became a myth while still alive. And when he passed away in 2005, tributes poured in from every corner of the world. They called him a genius, a pioneer, the king of late night. But behind those titles was a man no one fully understood. That's the real story of Johnny Carson, legendary, ruthless, untouchable, and forever shrouded in mystery. Watch till the end, because only then do you realize the cost of being a king.